Hello, this is Eric Topol, and this is Medicine and the Machine with my co-host Abraham Verghese. And we've got a special edition of our podcast today because we're privileged to have Dr. Kimberly Manning from Emory University. Welcome, Kimberly.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Great to see y'all or hear y'all.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the medical community has gotten to know you in recent years, but I'll just give a little bit of background because you're probably shy to brag about yourself. But I boarded both in medicine and pediatrics, professor at Emory, the associate chair of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Department of Medicine at Emory. And one of the great mentors and teachers in American medicine today has been awarded, has written a lot. In fact, the Reflections of a Grady Doctor was recognized by Oprah magazine as one of the top medical writings that exist today. But what's amazing is I thought you could tell us a bit to start about your background going into medical school. And I didn't realize that you and I converged in Cleveland for a number of years because you were at Case Western Metro and I was at Cleveland Clinic. So we even shared the same locale, and I didn't get to meet you until the Gold Foundation Gala some months ago. But anyway, tell us a little bit about growing up in LA and your father telling you, you'll never be able to be a doctor kind of thing.
Well, it was not my father that told me I would never be a doctor. It was my father who was told he couldn't be a doctor.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm originally from Inglewood, California. And those who have been out west, you all know that that's a suburb in Los Angeles. Pretty much during the time I grew up there, it was, working class, predominantly Black Americans and Mexican and some Asian Pacific Islander families there. And like many Black Americans, I always say they're not, if you meet them on the West Coast, their family is from the South. So my family came by way of the Great Migration from Alabama. And my dad and mom met at Tuskegee University. So did my grandparents, and my great grandmother went there too. So we have a family tradition at Tuskegee. But I think my origin story in medicine really starts with my dad because my dad is one of 11 children and was the first to go to college. And when it became apparent that he was headed that direction, he met with a college counselor and told the counselor that he liked science and liked people and thought he wanted to be a doctor. And the counselor, who really was well-meaning, said to him that, you're the first in your family to go to college. You need to be able to help your family. And you really need to major in engineering because that is where you will get a job as a Black man. If you do not get into Meharry or Howard, then, you are left with less options. And my father took that to heart. And so as a terrible math student, he went to Tuskegee. It took him 6 years to graduate. But fortunately, in that 5th year, he met my mother. So I'm glad it took him long. But the day I told my father that I thought I might be interested in being a doctor, he pounced on it and pretty much told me that I'm going to be a doctor. So
wow.
Yeah. Wow. So it's really neat, just one generation, removed, to have, my dad have these two options for medical schools pretty much in 1961 in Birmingham, Alabama, right? And then here I am, just one generation later. It never even occurred to me that I couldn't be a doctor. I just more declared that I wanted to be one. And it was tough, but I've never, I didn't grow up in an era where I thought I couldn't. So what a difference a generation makes.
Wow.
You've emerged as such a wonderful voice in medicine. I mean, a voice in general, but especially a voice of reason and encouraging people to take the vaccine, and, a voice for addressing racial inequalities in medicine. Was there a moment that you were galvanized into the role that you're in now, or had you been doing this all along? And then, the George Floyd moment changed a lot of things in America. Yeah. Can you look back and talk about that?
Yeah, I think, I'm going to have to push back to you all a little bit and let you know how much I admire your voices in medicine. And I think what happens over time is that as people know who you are, you feel a responsibility to think about like, well, what will I do with my influence, especially in a time such as this? So I've found myself feeling more of an urgency more than ever to do that. But I'll be honest with you, and I'll tell you something personal. In November 15th, 2012, my older sister, who was 20 months older than me, she died of a sudden cardiac death at 44. 1 minute she was here and 1 minute she was gone. I mean, she hadn't been sick. She was at my house the evening before helping my kids with a school project. She was hilarious. She was fun. And my family is very close. She too went to Tuskegee. So we are just all thick as thieves. And something about her passing gave me a post-traumatic growth. It just gave me such urgency about what I'm supposed to be doing as me. What is it that I'm supposed to be doing? And, while the death and the murder of Mr. George Floyd was horrific, I mean, when I was a freshman at Tuskegee, I was talking about the Central Park Five. And then when I was graduating from Tuskegee, I was talking about Mr. Rodney King. And then, it was Mr. Amadou Diallo. And it was just, that really wasn't anything new for people who have lived life through my life lens as a Black American. So what was different is that the whole world was now paying attention to, and I have this sort of unique space where I interact in many communities, in the Black community, also in a medical community, and just felt urgency to authentically say what I could say as me.
Well, I have had the chance with you as the moderator of the Gold Foundation. And I figured out when you moderating that program that you are literally a dynamo. And have you always been, would you describe yourself as, you can't be an introvert. Are you an extrovert?
Oh man, have you ever read Quiet by Susan Cain? All about,
Yeah.
Right. So I read that book and I sort of had an aha moment because I do get a lot of my energy from within, which is why I like to write and run by myself. And I tend to like intimacy and interactions with people, so not crowds or things like that. So I think I'm more of I call myself an ambivert. So the world would describe me probably as an extrovert, but I grew up cherished with parents who listened to me. When I had something to say, they listened to what I had to say, and they still talk to me, in ways where they want to hear what I have to say. And so I think if you are fortunate enough to have parents protect your innocence as long as they can, and then create a space for you to believe that what you have to say is worth somebody hearing, and then being sort of brought up in my emerging adulthood in two historically Black institutions, I never really thought a lot about my race or my identity as a Black American because everybody around me at Tuskegee and Meharry looked like me. It really wasn't until I got to Cleveland as an intern that I was like, yo, I'm other. Yeah, so I think that has a lot to do with it. I think a lot of people have things inside of them that they want to get out, but they haven't yet found the courage or felt the permission.
It's a wonderful story of how you evolved, from childhood to becoming a doctor. I read something that you wrote with Vinnie Aurora on how three of you were holding a virtual protest over George Floyd, and it was your awakening moment in the sense that the amount of, people must have Zoom bombed your, what's the word they use? Zoom bombing?
Yeah, Zoom bomb. Yeah.
Yeah. And basically, you were made to feel the vitriol that was out there. To talk a little bit about that, and I thought that article you wrote about that was just brilliant. Your response to that.
Oh, thank you so much for that. Vinnie Aurora and Shika Jain are two amazing women in medicine who I met virtually, really, and they contacted me and we agreed to work together on this virtual White Coat for Black Lives rally following the murder of Mr. George Floyd. And And part of it was because none of us could physically go to any of the marches. Vinny had just had a baby. Shika had some childcare things too. And I also had some conflicts as well. And so, we had this really ambitious plan. Somebody put the link straight out onto Twitter. And admittedly, again, me being the person from the probably the most marginalized group, I was like, are we sure we don't want this to be webinar style where people have to, and we were sort of, I think, naive about it and started, and perhaps the most hateful images that you could imagine came across the screen. I don't even want to describe it. It was bad. But when we stopped the recording, because there were like 300 people on, their children, it was bad. But I sort of sat there and I thought to myself, you know what, this is not the first time I've seen something like this before. And we still have something to say, and we have to keep going forward, right? If anything, somebody just told us to our face. It's probably some kid somewhere playing around who did this, right? So we decided to just go ahead and re-record it. Literally 15 minutes later, we jumped on a Zoom and just recorded it again and put it onto YouTube, and then posted that to Twitter, which got way, way, way more interactions than we would have ever gotten from the live event. But what we took away from it when we wrote that piece for NEJM was about our unique identities and what we were able to learn from each other. Because immediately Shika and Vinny came to protect me, right? They were like, oh my goodness, we brought this Black woman here who is a mother of 2 Black sons and married to a Black man. And then we traumatized her further. And I was trying to explain to them that, listen, there is nothing new under the sun. And if you think this is the worst my people have seen and kept on trucking, this is what we do. So let's keep it moving. Let's get our eye on that prize. And that was really to amplify this important mission. And so we did, and really kind of leaned on each other and showed what it looks like when you just kind of push on, but still kind of think about your wellness at the same time.
That's extraordinary. One of the things that strikes me, Kimberly, is you came to Emory at 2001. That's 20 years ago. And you look like you're in your 20s. That doesn't make sense. How this doesn't compute, Kimberly. This doesn't work.
Well, when a cardiologist tells you that you look young, I'm going to take that. I will tell you, my new secret sauce is sleep. Okay. I have spent my entire adulthood, without enough sleep. I'm the person who argued it with people that 6 hours for some people is plenty, 5.5. Some people but I get stuff done. And probably in my late 40s, I started realizing that, sleep is something that you really need. And now I'm pretty, maniacal about exercise and sleep. So hopefully that's coming across in my youthful glow through Zoom.
Yeah, really. Now, one of the things that struck me too is that your colleague, Carlos Del Rio, you wrote an amazing tribute to him. He also, like you, has a very big presence in social media and is one of the real great humanists there at Emory. Tell us about him, and has he been a mentor to you?
Oh, yeah. Carlos is a mentor and a friend to me. Sometimes Carlos forgets, there are these little, how you have these pivotal moments with people and they don't even remember, or somebody tells you something that you did and that changed their life and you think, really, did I do that? So when I was probably about 3 years on faculty, I had written an essay and my division chief at the time saw the essay and said, it was in a faculty development. And he said, this is really good. You should send it to a journal. But I had never heard of journals accepting essays. I'd never heard of that. I was like where? You meant like lay press? I was thinking the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. What are you talking about? So he suggested I send it to JAMA, and I sent it to JAMA and it got accepted like right away. I was like, wow. So I had something else that I wanted to send. I sent that and it got accepted by Annals. So as it turns out, both of these pieces came out a week apart. Now, mind you, I am an assistant professor. I have never seen my name in lights in those type of journals before. My chest is so proud. I'm so proud of myself. And we were at this function, and my chair was there, and bless his heart, I know he did not mean to hurt my feelings, but someone next to him said, "Oh, Kimberly was published in the Annals and in JAMA within 2 weeks." And he'd seen my pieces, and he says, "Yeah, they were essays, right?" And I said, "Yeah, they were narratives." He's like, "That's great. So now they know your name. So now you got to do some research. Get you some research in there too, so you got to get that kind of stuff too, so that'll help you with your trajectory to get promoted." And Carlos was there, and I was so proud, but it bust my bubble so bad. At the time, Carlos and I weren't close. And Carlos, as my chair walked away, Carlos looked at me and he says, "You know what you do? What you do is you just write so many and publish so damn many that eventually nobody can say anything to you. So you just keep sending your essays to those journals. And then eventually they're going to see them all over your CV, and they're going to be like, well, damn, we're going to have to figure out what to do with this and count it." And that is what I did. If Carlos had not said that to me, my imposter syndrome probably would have, amplified more than it already had. And it would have trivialized what was really a proud moment, and what should have been a moment to affirm me as a writer. It really made it seem like it was some little silly side hustle that I'd done. And Carlos shut that down. He was like, "Oh, I don't know anybody really here who does that. So just write so damn many." I was like, okay.
Medicine and the Machine will be right back.
Welcome to Medscape's latest podcast series, Medicine and the Machine, featuring Medscape's editor-in-chief, Dr. Eric Topol, and master storyteller and clinician, Dr. Abraham Verghese. Remember, you can find the latest in medical news, expert perspectives, clinical tools, continuing medical education, and more at medscape.com.
What a great story.
That's wonderful. I'm just struck by your Twitter feed and the way you use your Twitter feed as a dialogue between you and people that you meet, and it's a very unique use of Twitter, almost as though you're bringing a narrative into Twitter in a way that I haven't seen before. But I also wanted to ask you about Twitter education. There's a lot of medical education stuff that, frankly, I was learning by following some of the links that you had on your site. But talk a bit about the role of Twitter in medical education, because that was new to me.
Yeah.
I mean, other than reading my wonderful co-host, and his links are what keep me sounding like I know something about COVID and stuff like that.
Yeah, Dr. Topol is definitely part of my micro learning, for sure. I love that feed. I think that what's happened over probably like the last 3 years, people have become a lot more intentional and creative with ways to teach on Twitter. I think initially I was just mostly listening to podcasts that were focused on medical education. But there are a few people who sort of started this trend of creating what they refer to as tweetorials. Tony Brew is one person who I admire a lot, who was writing these sort of medical education-based tweet threads that really just taught a lot of medical concepts, and it would be about 12 or 13 tweets long. And I would walk away being like, okay, now I understand iron deficiency anemia. This is great. I feel like I say this on every podcast, but it bears repeating. I think a lot about how Toni Morrison said she wrote her book, The Bluest Eye, because it was the book she wanted to read. It was the book she hungered for. And I think for myself as a teacher on Twitter, I try to write and share the things that I wish I could see or that I want to read. And then I think that now more and more people are teaching the things in a way that they wish to teach, since we know the human attention span is so short that bring the teaching where the people are, and the people are on social media and on their devices. So I think it's sort of just kind of evolved with the times.
Well, it's such a great contribution, really. You have a unique perspective, both as an internist and a pediatrician. So can you integrate that with your views of the pandemic, now that we're getting to be the 2-year mark of this mess that we've been in?
Yeah, so my training is in combined internal medicine and pediatrics. The majority of what I do now is general internal medicine and hospital medicine with adults. But, I mean, once you train in pediatrics, you're always a pediatrician and I'm a mom. So I think that the special piece about my pediatric training is the communication skills that you learn and the things that aren't spoken because kids can't always talk to you. I think it kind of heightens some of your communication skills. And, I found that once I became a parent also that the things I knew in pediatrics combined with now my experience, it made me realize how ignorant I was before I had kids. But I think I pull all of that together and think, I know what it feels like to be scared as a mom. I know what it feels like to be scared something could happen to my loved one. I know what it feels like to have somebody pull my husband over and ask him to get out of the car and get on his knees in our neighborhood. I know what all of that is like. And I just try again to be courageous about taking my identity and transparently sharing with people things that they may not be seeing. For example, again, if your husband got pulled over in your, upper middle class neighborhood and told to get out of the car he owns, get on his knees and asked if he has a weapon, it's plausible to think that the same community where that happens might not be people that are thinking about your best interests. That could, that's plausible. And I think I think about all of those things when I get ready to talk to patients. And I think my pediatric background helps me with a level of patience, I think, in the communication and understanding the fear. Because parents, I mean, anybody who's been a parent knows that is a whole uniquely vulnerable space to be in and a love you've never felt. And you need to be handled somewhat with kid gloves, but still told the truth.
You've written a lot about vaccine hesitancy, vaccine resistance, and I'd love your, just global insights on how you see the fact that we are so poorly vaccinated as a country compared to some other countries. What you see the breakdown of how that works and how that works at a personal level when you deal with people.
Yeah, I'm an optimist and have been since a child, and so somebody once told me I was annoyingly optimistic. So I give you that disclaimer, which I believe that when I talk to every individual person, the same way I think that if somebody without their mask can pass COVID on to 6 people or however many people, I think communication and kindness has an R naught as well, right? And so I think that we're one of the places where we miss the mark, and I'll center on historically excluded and minority groups. I think some of the labels it missed the mark a little. I tend to not use the term vaccine hesitancy. I tend to say vaccine deliberation. And I think of people as on a spectrum of deliberation. Now, some people, they way on the spectrum where they're like, no way. But I found that even those people, many of them have not had any conversations with anybody. And it's not, their level of conviction about where they are is not as strong as people think it is. And you just need somebody to plant a seed and open the door. So I think that's one place where the mark was missed. I think this initial rush of, hey, let's get a playbook for, how to talk to the minorities about this, about their, vaccine hesitancy, when no group is a monolith. Every single person has their unique reason for why they feel as they do. And, I mean, we're gold humanism folk, right? All of us, right? So I think the secret sauce is humanism and being kind to people and listening and not having a playbook to plan back what you're going to say while the person is talking. And so I think that that's a piece where we miss the mark. I also think that there's a little bit too much friction in the ability to get a vaccine. And while we do have them everywhere, the friction that I speak of is something as simple as, here, you have to go fill out this form. So, at Grady now we're doing things where you want to get vaccinated, I'm walking you over there. when they hand you the sheet, I ask you, do you want me to fill it out? If you don't want me to fill it out, fine. But I'm finding that there's a lot of points where we could reduce friction for people that would allow them to do it all the way through, particularly in groups that are sort of under-vaccinated.
That's really insightful. I wonder if you could extend your comments to the age 5 to 11 now of children, because this is the big week when that's beginning. I've got a 7-year-old grandson who's about to get vaccinated, which I'm thrilled about, but I want to get your sense about that. I mean, I know you convert a lot of people. You're very persuasive, but tell us about children. That's even more tricky than these adults deliberating, right?
Yeah, and I generally always say in my head, convey, don't convince. May I share information with you based on what I know that might help you in your deliberation process. That way we can co-create a plan, right? So I actually just tweeted about this. I was in at the car wash a few days ago, and I was, this lady was watching the news, and she was like, oh no, about the children vaccines. And as we began to chat, she told me that she was vaccinated, but there was no way she was going to let them do that to her kids. And I told her I vaccinated my children already. Now my children are teenagers, so I guess they're not children, but she told me I was the first person she'd ever met who had vaccinated my kids. And she started asking me, was I scared? And what did I think? And the reasons why I vaccinated my children are still relate to what I would do if my children were younger. And it is that, children, though it's possible that they can get sick, we know that's more rare. They still walk around and see people and hug grandparents. And my children are around my parents and around other people. My son works, at a fast food restaurant, and he's interacting with the public. And so I told that lady that day that, I was a little bit nervous about it, but I'm more nervous about the idea of, my kids coming in contact with somebody and doing them harm. And what if my child is in that tiny percentage of kids who ends up in the ICU on ECMO? I don't know how to predict if that's going to happen or not. And everything is fine until it's not. So if I could prevent that, then I want to do that. And where we left it was her saying, you know what, I'm really, really going to think about it. And she had started with, oh, hell no. That was where she had started. So to me, I think that moves farther. And I think all of us have had experiences with a firm no that we ran into 2 weeks later, and they have a button on that says, I got my vaccine. I'm like, well, what happened? But, sometimes people just need more time to deliberate on their own.
We've had many conversations with wonderful people like Uchi Blackenstock and others talking about how you bring about racial equity and inclusion in academic medical centers, in corporations. And many academic centers are playing catch up in the sense that, they were doing certain things, but boy, they're doing it a lot more now. Do you have any sort of general advice for how academic centers go about this and things that you've observed over the years?
Yeah, I'm really fortunate here at Emory in my role as Associate Vice Chair for DEI in the Department of Medicine. A lot of that has to do with our chair. And our chair didn't only call for leaders in this role, he made it a line item. There has to be a budget. You have to protect people's time to do this. And I think that's a big place where people are currently missing the mark. They're forming task forces and councils, which we all know translates to no protected time. And if you are already feeling racial battle fatigue, and then somebody tells you, oh, and I want you to make a strategic plan for us on DEI, that is a setup for burnout. So I think one piece is that leaders and people who are chairs and deans, they have got to put some money on it. Give them administrative support, protect time, give them the resources they need to go to conferences and to grow and to learn, because I quickly found out that being Black and having gone to a HBCU is not enough for me to be, a subject matter expert in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I had a lot to learn. And thank goodness I've had the support to do that. And then the other piece is the reporting structure. Another problem is that often DEI leaders, they report to some, they report laterally. They don't report at the same place where other leaders are reporting. We report to our chair. And our DEI leaders in the School of Medicine report to the dean. And I think that that's an important thing too, because over time, people get tired of a subject. So, there will be people, just like as people got tired of talking about quality improvement or patient safety or whatever they were tired of talking about. If you have a vice chair of quality, then you can be tired all you want. They're still at the table and it's going to remain relevant because it's a line item and a place where we have goals in our strategic plans. So, you got to put some treasure down on it if you think it's important. You can't just make it a task force. I know I'm probably stepping on somebody's toes saying this, but
no, actually, it's really big that you do that. I don't know how the DEI efforts can go forward with as they typically do, which, as you say, here now you're in charge of that. We're not giving you any resources. And the other thing is,
but you know what, Eric, I want to mention that the way that they get people to do it is that people feel urgency. So as a Black American and a descendant of people who survived slavery, there's an urgency for us to get this done. And so when you ask me to do it, but say, oh, but we got like 5% time for you, well, we will build up to that. Because I feel the urgency, I feel like, well, if I don't do it, nobody's going to do it. So there are people all over the country in that position, and it's sad.
So I just want to summarize, we're really lucky today to have time with one of the great American medical teachers, mentors, humanists, dynamos. It's just a joy. You are a treasure, and you're going to continue to have a big impact in American medicine. We're very lucky to have just this short conversation with you, and we'll keep following your career because it's just amazing. And I still can't believe that you would have teenage kids. That's not possible. Okay. It's just not possible. But thanks so much for joining us, Kimberly.
Thank you, Kimberly. What a wonderful interview. Lovely things you had to say. What a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, it's such a privilege to talk to both of you. And again, I deeply admire the work that you do. And I appreciate you giving me the space to bring my whole self into this conversation. I appreciate that. And I appreciate being seen. So thank you.
This podcast is intended for U.S. healthcare professionals.